All hooks open and nominal.
Okay, we see separation.
Separation is confirmed.
Double copy.
Okay, as you can see there, undocking confirmed of Crew Dragon Endeavour from the International Space Station on time at 5:45 a.m. Central, 10:45 GMT, while station and Dragon flew approximately 263 miles over the South Pacific, flying west of Chile.
On the big loop, Dragon separation visually confirmed.
Copy.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Relocate burn 0 complete.
Double copies.
Also heard the call out there that the relocate burn was complete. That was the final of the 3 burns of the service section Dracos performed. That final relocate burn lasted about 21 seconds.
Dragon already about 50 meters away from the station. It's heading to a 60-meter hold point before transferring to the new docking axis.
Dragon is working to acquire LiDAR tracking, which will be used by Dragon to autonomously execute this relocation maneuver. Like Gary mentioned before, we expect it to back straight away to about 60 meters.
From the external cameras of the International Space Station, you can see there in the distance the Crew Dragon holding right now at about 87 meters from its original docking port. Teams are analyzing the making sure that Crew Dragon itself is ready for the next maneuver to transition to the new docking axis. Right now you can see it directly in front of its original docking port. It'll swing upwards from this view to the new docking port that's on the zenith or space-facing side of the International Space Station's Harmony port.
In case you've just joined, SpaceX Crew Dragon had an on-time undocking at 5:45 a.m. Central, 10:45 GMT, while the station and Dragon flew approximately 263 miles over the South Pacific, flying west of Chile. Dragon is about 70 meters away from station, 10 meters to go back to the 60-meter hold point.
And you heard that confirmation, the Crew Dragon Endeavour making a successful maneuver from the original docking axis after undocking on time, 5:45 a.m. Central Time, moving out to about 95 meters, then back to 60 meters, initiating the transition maneuver and holding at 60 meters from the original docking axis to the midpoint. Now it's now it's making a transition from that midpoint to the new docking axis. It'll take just about another 9 minutes. In the meantime, we'll cover the crew that's currently on board Crew Dragon Endeavour. First is Dragon Commander Shane Kimbrough. It is his third trip to space. He was born in Killeen, Texas, and raised in Atlanta, and was selected as an astronaut in 2004. Kimbrough is a retired U.S. Army colonel and holds degrees in aerospace engineering and operations research. He first launched aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour on STS-126, then aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft for Expedition 49 and 50. Kimbrough is the spacecraft commander for the Crew 2 flight and is a flight engineer for Expeditions 65 and 66 on station. In addition to the usual complement of science and maintenance work for our astronauts, he completed 3 spacewalks earlier this summer with Thomas Pesquet to install the first in a series of new solar arrays on the station, bringing his total spacewalk count to 9.
This mission marks pilot Megan McArthur's second trip to space, but her first one to the space station. She was born in Honolulu, but considers California her home state. NASA selected McArthur as an astronaut in 2000. She holds degrees in aerospace engineering and oceanography. McArthur served as mission specialist aboard Space Shuttle Atlantis on STS-125, the final servicing mission of the Hubble Space Telescope in 2009. She operated the shuttle's robotic arm over the course of 12 days and 21 hours, capturing the telescope and maneuvering crew members throughout the 5 spacewalks to upgrade Hubble's science instruments, along with removal and replacement of other components to lengthen the telescope's life. McArthur is Crew Dragon Endeavour's pilot for the Crew 2 mission and is serving as a flight engineer conducting science and maintenance for Expeditions 65 and 66 aboard the station.
Mission Specialist Akihiko Hoshide is currently on his third trip to space. Born in Tokyo, Hoshide was selected as an astronaut in 1999 by the National Space Development Agency of Japan, known today as Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA. Hoshide earned degrees in aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering. He flew on STS-124 aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery to deliver and install Japan's science laboratory Kibo. He also flew aboard the Russian Soyuz on Expeditions 32 and 33 for a 124-day visit to the International Space Station. In 2014, he also served as commander of the 18th NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operation, an underwater expedition at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Aquarius habitat off of Florida's Key Largo coast. He now serves as the commander for the International Space Station for Expedition 65 and as a mission specialist for the Crew 2 flight.
Crew 2 is mission specialist Thomas Pesquet's second trip to space. Born in Rouen, France, Pesquet was selected by ESA as an astronaut in 2009. He has a degree in spacecraft design and control and more than 2,300 flight hours as a commercial airline pilot. Pesquet first flew to space on the Soyuz as a flight engineer for Expeditions 50 and 51. In that time, he worked on more than 50 experiments and performed 2 spacewalks to maintain the space station. He has logged 197 days in space. Pesquet is the first European to fly in a Crew Dragon and the first European to launch from America in more than a decade. He's currently a flight engineer for Expedition 65 and will take over the role of station commander later this fall before returning to Earth with the rest of the Crew 2 astronauts.
Now we will be getting some periodic views from the International Space Station during today's port relocation maneuver. The Dragon itself has maneuvered from the original docking access and past the midway point. We're now in the final stretch of the transition from the midway point, which is the halfway marker between the original docking access and the new one. And Dragon, you see now, is making its way to the new docking access on the space-facing side, really pointing right out towards the space. That's where the International Docking Adapter 3 is located. We're in the final stretch, and now starting to get some views from the International Space Station of Crew Dragon Endeavour in the final stretch of this transition from the midway point to the new docking axis. In the final moments here, we're getting some questions using the hashtag AskNASA. Please keep sending them in as we continue our coverage of Crew Dragon's maneuver to a new port. This first question comes in asking about the views that we're seeing. How come people in Space Station Mission Control Room are able to maintain live views of the International Space Station, but we can't? The answer is that the folks that you're seeing here in Mission Control Houston are looking at the same views that we are. So now we are getting the views from the outside of the International Space Station using some of the external cameras. You see here's a shot from the back of the room. We're now getting these views. Now, the space-to-ground communications, the reason we're able to get these views is due to a communications antenna that's located on the outside of the International Space Station, pointing towards the tracking and data relay satellites. Now, for a large portion of today's maneuver, some of those shots are going to be masked. The communication path between the station, which is 250 miles, and the geosynchronous tracking and data relay satellites, which are more than 22,000 miles from Earth. We mask off those areas to prevent any damage to the communication antennas as they're sending high data rate radio frequency signals, where Dragon really is in between that communication path. So we wouldn't want the high data rate communication signals to bounce off of the Dragon back to the antenna and possibly affect some of the auto-track sensors that are on the outside of the station. So the views that you're seeing are going to be periodic. We may lose them as we make our way to the new docking axis. But right now we're in the home stretch getting some good views. The Cronus, the mission controller here in Mission Control Houston, is overexposing the image of the Dragon. You see it sort of very brightly coming into our view now. When the Cronus overexposes the image and increases the aperture of the station's cameras, you can start to see some of the Draco engines firing the different plumes. You'll see that coming out of Dragon as it makes its transition. That helps to stabilize the Dragon as it makes its way from one docking axis to the other. You can see them overexposing now.
If you look carefully at your screen, you can see the Crew Dragon capsule there firing its some actuation thrusters there to align for this autonomous procedure.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has arrived at the 60-meter hold point on zenith, and Dragon is configured for docking. Confirm crew readiness for approach 1.
Endeavour copies all. Crew is ready for approach 1.
And we're getting views from the external cameras of the International Space Station. You can see the forward end of the Dragon right there, that soft capture ring fully extended. And the sequence for moving in from waypoint 2 to docking has begun. We're now inside 20 meters from the International Space Station. This sequence, as we move in, will take about 4 minutes until we get a contact and capture of the Dragon, bringing our 4 crew members inside Dragon back inside the International Space Station. Some of the calls you heard during this approach, we of course have Mark Van High inside the International Space Station monitoring the approach, of course with the 4 crew members of the Dragon itself inside watching the sequences here. The big loop you're hearing is a communications channel of the space-to-ground communications as well as Dragon-to-ground. So all the communications you're hearing is being heard by the ground teams here in Mission Control Houston as well as Mission Control in Hawthorne, and of course the crew inside Dragon as well as inside the International Space Station. We're now 15 meters in closing.
Love to see this view of the Crew Dragon approaching the space station autonomously, driving itself. If you recall from the previous version of the previous version of Dragon, the cargo capsules, they dock to the station actually not by docking but by berthing, which essentially required the robotic Canadarm to grapple the spacecraft and bring it to the station manually. So to see Crew Dragon, this upgraded version, flying on its own without any assistance and able to dock autonomously with the space station is an awesome capability that's just so great to see with our eyes here.
Meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
At 10 meters away from this vantage point, you see the Earth there in the lower left corner. We're now flying 262 statute miles over India.
Great shot of the forward.
5 meters.
Great shot of the forward end of Crew Dragon there. Located near the top are the forward Draco thrusters, which of course are not being utilized for today's maneuvers. All the maneuvers are managed with the service section Draco thrusters.
Crew hands off point, 3 meters in closing.
Hands off.
Copy, hands off. Soft capture confirmed.
Copy, soft capture confirmed.
And with that, we have a confirmed contact and soft capture. Dragon and station were flying 262 miles over western China. That docking time, 6:35 a.m. Central Time, 11:35 GMT.
Soft capture ring retraction in progress.
Endeavor copy.
Upcoming, the teams will command Crew Dragon to begin the hard capture by commanding the hooks. Again, they will operate in 2 sets of 6, so a total of 12 hooks. Will hook in and close, and we'll have confirmation of hard mate complete.
From a live view of the International Space Station Flight Control Room, you can see we're losing some of those live views from the International Space Station, but that mask has been turned off to make sure we protect some of the communications equipment, the space-to-ground antennas, and auto-track sensors aboard the station. So we should be regaining some views shortly. In the meantime, we did have confirmed contact and capture at 6:35 a.m. Central Time, 11:35 GMT. And that was after an on-time undocking from the original docking port at 5:45 a.m. Central Time.
There on your screen, a shot of both the pressurized and unpressurized sections of Crew Dragon. The pressurized section being the conical portion at the top. That's where the crew is currently sitting in their seats. And the bottom half is the trunk, and that's where we place unpressurized cargo, such as the International Docking Adapter upon transportation from Earth to the International Space Station. That's where those were placed for transportation to station, where they were then removed and installed in their now permanent homes. The trunk will be jettisoned whenever it's time for Crew Dragon to return home, and allow the heat shield at the bottom of the pressurized section to be exposed and allow the Crew Dragon to splash down safely in the Atlantic Ocean.
Dragon SpaceX ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Endeavor copy.
With that side view of Crew Dragon, we have a great shot of the service section Draco thrusters that I mentioned earlier. They're the portholes there on the side of Crew Dragon. That is where the thrust comes out from the Draco thrusters, and those are the service section thrusters that we utilized for today's port relocation maneuvering.
station Endeavour on the big loop. MCS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Taking copies.
Endeavour copies.
With the soft capture ring retracted before the hard mate sequence can begin, again, there are 12 hooks that are going to secure Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Docking Adapter. Teams here in Mission Control Houston configured the International Space Station to be on control moment gyro. Attitude control. Now that it's switched over to control moment gyros, they can begin the hard docking sequence with the driving of the first set of hooks. They're going to drive 6 at a time to make 12 hooks total, securing the Dragon Endeavour to the International Docking Adapter. And with that, we have confirmation that the first set of hooks are driving. As the first set of hooks continue to drive, there are again 2 sets of hooks, 6 each, to hard mate the Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Space Station. A recap of today's activities. Early this morning, the crew woke up at about 1 o'clock a.m. Central Time, getting ready for their day, eating some food, brushing their teeth, and getting suited up to get ready to go inside Dragon and begin today's port relocation maneuver. After they ingress the Dragon and close the hatches both on the Dragon side and International Space Station, NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei closed the hatch on the station side, the APAS hatch, after affixing a docking target. The crew was suited up, performed leak checks in their Spacex spacesuits, and got ready for an undocking of the original docking ports, where Crew Dragon Endeavour was just about an hour ago. The Crew Dragon Endeavour and the 4 crew members inside, Shane Kimbrough, Megan McArthur, Thomas Pesquet, and Akihiko Hoshide, undocked at 5:45 a.m. Central Time about an hour ago and made the transition to the new docking port, making contact and capture with the port that you're seeing here, the Zenith or space-facing port, at 5:35 a.m. Central Time, completing the 50-minute maneuver from the original docking port to its new home, making room on the forward harmony part for the Boeing CST-100 Starliner to dock here in next week. July 30th is when it's set to launch, making contact and capture with the International Space Station set 24 hours later, July 31st.
At this point in time, the first set of hooks have closed and the second set are driving. Again, there are 12 in total and they operate in 2 sets of 6. And we're waiting for confirmation of the closure of the second set of hooks.
Endeavour, SpaceX on the big loop. Hard capture is complete. You are go to raise your visors.
Copy, hard capture complete. Visors up.
And with that, we have confirmation that the second set of hooks has finished driving. So all 12 hooks now securing the Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Space Station. Teams here will now undergo a series of steps to pressurize the vestibule in between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch, just like we saw earlier during today's coverage with the depressurization of the original docking port. We'll see everything in reverse to allow the pressurization to equalize, making sure everything is good before opening up the hatch and letting our 4 crew members inside Dragon back inside the International Space Station. So now that the Crew 2 NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Akihiko Hoshide have redocked with the International Space Station, we're going to wrap our live coverage of Dragon's second port relocation maneuver. The crew will take some time now to get out of their suits and begin the process of opening up the hatches in about 2 hours. As mentioned earlier, the relocation has freed up Harmony's forward port for the docking of another commercial spacecraft built to carry humans, Boeing's CST-100 Starliner. This will be Boeing's second test flight of Starliner without crew, as they seek to put the spacecraft through all the phases of a mission before flying people inside of it for the first time. It's set to launch from Florida's Space Coast on July 30th and arrive at the space station about 24 hours later on July 31st. Once Starliner arrives and docks, we'll have another historic first, with 2 commercial spacecraft built to fly humans docked to the space station at the same time.
Meanwhile, Crew 2 will remain on station until this fall. Crew 2 NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur, JAXA astronaut Akihiko Hoshide, and ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet are targeting early to mid-November for a return to Earth inside Crew Dragon Endeavour off the coast of Florida. But before they go, NASA's SpaceX Crew 3 mission will launch and arrive with NASA astronauts Raja Chari, Tom Marshburn, and Caleb Barron, as well as ESA astronaut Matthias Maurer. So we'll have another full house with 2 Dragon crews docked to the space station at the same time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Docking sequence is complete. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. We will be changing cameras to external only.
Copy all. Docking system complete. We are go to doff suits. Arthur, thanks to you and your team and all the folks in Houston who got us here safely back on the station.
So again, with those words from the crew and from here, Mission Control Houston, and the teams, of course, over at Mission Control Hawthorne, that'll wrap up our coverage for today's port relocation maneuver. Crew Dragon Endeavour now hard-mated to its new docking port on the space-facing side of the International Space Station. That's it for the action for us during this operation, but there's more to come. Later today, we'll provide coverage of the launch of the Russian multipurpose logistics module. That coverage is set to begin at 10:30 a.m. Central Time, so stick with us and we'll provide that launch coverage up until it launches at 10:58 a.m. Central Time. That's not it for this week. We, of course, have another operation coming on Friday. We'll have the undocking of Progress 77, a Russian cargo vehicle. It'll be bringing the Pirs docking compartment with it. We'll set our coverage for 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday, July 23rd for an undocking at 9:15 a.m. Central Time. Lots of actions to come. Well, thanks again for one more time for tuning in for today's coverage. We'll hope you join us, of course, for the upcoming coverage of some of the Russian operations, and of course for the launch of OFT-2, Orbital Flight Test 2, of the Boeing Starliner later this month, and again this fall for a lot of upcoming operations, including cargo missions. We have the Northrop Grumman 16 mission and the SpaceX CRS-23 cargo mission, and of course our crew operations for Crew 2 and Crew 3 activities in the fall. Until then, so long.